everybody. You're all very welcome to this very special webinar. It's the perfect time to host this wonderful panel. The Women's Rugby Six Nations is in full swing with the Irish team landing a comprehensive win in Cardiff over the weekend. Now, this event is the fourth in Sporting Pride's LGBTQ plus Women in Sports webinar series. Sporting Pride's aim is to make Ireland's sporting community the most diverse and inclusive in the world, and increasing the visibility of some of Ireland's finest LGBTQ plus athletes is just one element of their work. They've partnered with the Emerald Warriors for this event, Ireland's first LGBTQ plus inclusive rugby team, who are hoping to establish a women's team in the not so distant future. Dublin Pride are also supporting this event and are thrilled to promote the visibility of our community members in all walks of life. So I am delighted to have with me this evening Nora Stapleton, Joy Neville and Ruth O'Reilly, all ex-international players, and Joy now a current Rugby Union referee. You're all very welcome. How are you doing?
Great. Yeah, good. Thanks. All good.
All good on it.
Good, delighted to have you all. Normally I give a little bit of introduction to whoever I'm talking to, but I'm going to hand it over to you. And if you want to give us, I suppose, a brief history of your background in sport, and also maybe the areas of interest you have in relation to both LGBTQ plus women, LGBTQ plus people and women in sports. So Ruth, do you want to go first? I'm choosing you to go first.
No problem. Thank you. Yes, I'm Ruth O'Reilly, former international rugby player, as you mentioned, based here in Galway. I've been playing rugby for over 20 years. More recently have got involved in the administrative side of things. So as the director of women's rugby here in Galwegians. I suppose I'm known for possibly speaking more than I should when in relation to women in sports issues, particularly in rugby circles. I'm also a mother of one, so I'm familiar with the chartering that territory as an LGBTQ plus couple as well. So yeah,
brilliant. That's why perfect for this panel, Ruth. Speaking out about things. Nora, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, and thanks again for having me here. So I'm Nora Stapleton. So my sports career, I guess, interested in all sports, like many people. Played a lot of Gaelic football through kind of my early 20s, and played a lot of soccer, but then turned my hand to rugby and found out that I was a little bit better at that maybe than the other two. And so played with Ireland for about 7 years, played in 3 World Cups, and yeah, had a great time with the two ladies as well, and we've plenty of memories to share. I'm now the Women in Sport lead with Sport Ireland, so I support all the sports across the country and all the local sports partnerships as well, and various other stakeholders. And I look at everything from how do we encourage more women into coaching, refereeing, into leadership roles, governance roles, increased participation, and look at the visibility as well. And I guess for myself, I would have struggled coming out when I was younger, so it's always something that I'm quite keen to try and ensure that no teenage girl went through maybe the same thing that I went through as well, and just that things are more inclusive for them in their sport and careers.
Absolutely, that's still really important even today. And Joy, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Perfect, thanks Anna. Joy Neville, former international, played for 11 years. When I retired, hung up my boots to peace and family, and played to start refereeing. But I suppose growing up, my mum always wanted a baby girl. I was the youngest in the family, 4 older brothers, and she got a tomboy as a 5th child who so happened to marry a woman, which she actually loves more than she does me now at this stage. And the boys certainly take credit for toughening me up in the environment of playing, and now obviously refereeing. I remember down in the local park, I went to catch a save. I was in goals, and I dislocated my thumb. And this was back 20 years ago when there was no taxis, and I was hoping to run back home with one of my oldest brothers to find mum and dad. No mum and dad, no one around but my oldest brother, Gary. He was about 17, and he decided to pop my thumb back into place. And he did a great job of that ever since. You know, so the lads take credit for toughening me up, and that's certainly the case. They did toughen me up, and they prepared me for life. And like Nora, I suppose my story. I was 24 when I came out. I did struggle for many years, and I think it's important to share our stories in comforting and helping others do the same thing and feel secure and supported.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I feel so strongly within these webinars, hearing women and men's stories about being open and honest about their sexuality and how important visibility is, especially for younger athletes who still today might struggle with coming out. So the first thing I want to talk to the three of you about is rugby for women and how inclusive it is for beginners to those who represent their country. I was reading, I don't know, just through a few articles today, and it's been a long journey, I think, for women in rugby, and it has, I don't know, gathered a pace and momentum over the last, I suppose, 5 to 10 years because of people who have broke the mold or spoken out about things that they have not necessarily been happy with. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that in relation to rugby for women. Nora, I'll start with you.
Where did I come at it? So I used to work for the IRFU as well. So I spent 6 years working really hard to ensure that the visibility of the women's team and women in rugby was improved, I guess. Like, I'm very ashamed to admit, but when I was younger, I fell into the whole stereotypicalness that women who played rugby were all lesbians or butch, and that is something that I think tainted the sport. Now, this is going back, 20 years, but it was something that impacted me, and I'm sure it was also because of how I was feeling personally about my own kind of sexuality. So, but that was something that impacted me and stopped me from starting, which is really annoying because I'm sure I would have been way better if I had been playing from a younger age. But so then when I worked from the IRFU, and when I started playing rugby, God, it's, that's not the case at all, and it's so inclusive, and it's a sport where absolutely anybody can join, and where the teams, because I played a lot, as I said, I played a lot of football and soccer, and great teammates in those teams as well, but rugby was just different, and in some way it was more welcoming, and in some way it didn't matter if you were the best person on the team or somebody who couldn't catch a ball. Everyone was valued equally, and that's one thing that I love about it and still love about it.
Yeah. Ruth, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's almost 20 plus years ago since I first rocked up to a rugby training session or even a rugby meeting, and it's funny, those sort of connotations weren't even in my mind, around the lesbian or butch nature of it. It just didn't enter into it. Now, possibly that was naivety or just a lack of information from my side. But I think I'd echo what Nora says. I think rugby across the board is so inclusive, particularly the women's game. I think there is always an open door and a welcomeness regardless of your caliber as a player, and there's a place for you. I came to rugby, as I say, in college with a little to no sporting background, and certainly no sporting acumen or skills or talents of any shape or form, and I just found my people in that environment, and it was that I suppose instilled the graw in me for the sport, and that's what I suppose propelled me to work hard at it and eventually get to the point where I was somewhat decent at it. But I think it's that camaraderie, it's that community within a club, and particularly within a women's section, that I think is so inclusive, and it's so inviting, I think, regardless of your sexuality, and not just that, regardless of your beliefs, it's irrelevant. Everyone is just there to enjoy themselves, to have fun, to play a bit of sport, and it's not about any of those other things.
Mm-hmm. Joy, a very basic question: do most women come to rugby in college? Is that how you got into it? And what was it like starting off then? Now, say compared to how things are now for the women's team, who are, as we all know, having a fantastic time, you know, in the Six Nations.
Yeah, and a great win last weekend. I suppose, I don't know, it's probably similar for you guys. I first started when I was 17. Unfortunately, the development structures weren't the same as what they are now. Thankfully, you have tag and touch, underage structures, good development plans in place where younger girls can participate and get involved. But when I first started, you know, I was 17 and I was a late starter. And by the time I was 18, I was on the Munster and Irish squad. And those times were very different. When we played internationals back in the 2000s, we were playing against the likes of England's and France's semi-professional sides, getting paid £400 a month. And in some cases, still the same because they are still semi-professional, fully professional. But it wasn't about, it was probably the only time also where our house was female dominated, because anytime there's only spare space on the floor, it was all the girls would come and stay at ours, and you'd repay the favour and you pay for your own lunches. And we weren't under the umbrella of the IRFU. So we've come a long way. And I think what happened really for us was something similar to what happened to the FAI, the women's soccer team, whereby it was, I suppose, highlighted the fact that they had to give back their tracksuits and that. I don't know if you're familiar with those stories, but we discussed this in the last couple of days with the girls about the time we had to go to France. And if it was cheaper to go to England via France, even though it took 24 hours extra, that's what we'd have to do. But on this occasion, we were never set up for success. We were due to arrive into Charles de Gaulle city centre within an hour of arriving in the airport. We missed the train by 4 or 5 hours. We ended up sitting there till midnight, getting an overnight 8-hour train, arriving 8 a.m. the morning of the game, having 3 hours sleep, pre-match meal, and we played the game. But I'd like to bring it back to what the girls are saying is we had a great group of players. You always have a great group of players because of the sport. It's so inclusive. And I think you learn so much from each other's experiences. And because we had so many downs, we became so resilient. And what I loved about that story was we lost by the smallest margin against France in France by 1 point. And off the back of that, a letter was written by one of our teammates, an English teacher, really well written letter. She sent it to national papers. It was printed in black and white. And from that moment on, I suppose, organizations became more accountable. The support structures were more evident, and obviously leading then to the 2013 Grand Slam. So, and I suppose success breeds success as well, Anna. So, and I think the best thing that happened off the back of that, and I don't know if Nora and Ruth that you agree with this, but I remember when I first started, for at least 7 or 8 years, the amount of times people asked, "Oh, is there a women's international, rugby team?" And that stopped. Like, I felt anyway that completely minimized, because success does breed success, and we had the whole nation behind us. It probably helped the fact that the men's team didn't do too well that year. Not that I'm laughing at them, but it did help our case. But yeah, so I suppose we have a lot of history. We've gone through a lot of hard times, but we stayed strong, and thankfully, Irish rugby is where it is now.
Yeah, I think that the landscape has changed phenomenally, in terms of women's rugby in Ireland, and I think particularly because of a lot of those pioneers of the sport have stayed in the sport and have ensured, even beyond their playing days, that there is that continuity. That we know where we've come from. We've known how hard it can be. And we know what supports are needed for players to actually achieve their best. Like, I'm thinking of the likes of Gráinne O'Connell, who's still involved in Munster women's rugby, and she's been around for decades at this stage, and to still have the want to be involved as a volunteer and to ensure that the game is striving and driving as much as possible is huge. And I think the underage is a massive part of it. Like, look at the likes of Bevan Parsons there last week. A player like her would not have been around 10 years ago because they simply wouldn't have been playing rugby at that age, so that's a huge difference.
Yeah. I want to move on now to how inclusive rugby is for the LGBTQ LGBTQ plus community. And Nora, I want to ask you, you said there was this, not reluctance, but because of the association of rugby and women's rugby being full of lesbians or, only butch players playing it or whatever, did that make it more difficult for you then to come out as a lesbian because you were in that world? And then do you think it's different today for younger LGBTQ plus people in rugby?
No, like it was more difficult because when I was playing football and soccer, it was more difficult for me to come out then because I guess I didn't want to be perceived as just another sports person. Oh, and of course she's gay. So look, these are the things that go on in your teenage mind and young 20s, isn't it? So I was probably the similar age to Jo. I was about 24, I'd say, as well. When I came out, and around about that time, I'd gone traveling for a year and had come back, and then decided I was playing tag rugby, and somebody said, "Will you give proper rugby a go? I think you'll enjoy it." And I think it took that bit of time of going away, traveling, and coming back and being like, "Yeah, you know what? Geez, I don't care anymore. Of course I want to play this. I've always wanted to play it." And this is the same 10-year-old girl who wanted to play when she was 10 years of age, but was told that girls couldn't play rugby. So I think there were just so many things and so many statements made to me growing up that impacted me getting involved. So no, rugby didn't stop me from coming out or anything like that. I guess it was a very welcoming environment. But I think what it also did, and when I was working for the IRFU, I was really kind of keen to show everybody that rugby was inclusive to everyone, because I thought it was nearly unfair on the straight girls who were then being labelled as being gay and they just go playing rugby, so it was all about changing the perception. And I think that's gone now. I definitely do. I just think it's another sport. It's a growing sport in Ireland. There are so many young girls who are taking up the sport because they're looking at their heroes and role models on the international team, and they're seeing these really fit elite athletes who are playing with a smile on their face. And that's what inspires young girls and teenage girls, and that's what inspires the parents as well. And the parents are seeing this and they're driving their kids down to training. So I think that's all completely gone, and rugby's now a sport where you can progress through, where you can represent your country, where you can travel to far off countries. You can play sevens, you can play 15s, you can go to the Olympics. So the opportunities are just vast in it now.
Yeah. Joy, would you feel rugby is inclusive for all LGBTQ plus people?
Yeah, I do. I think it's extremely inclusive, and it's an inclusive game as well. And I've come across quite a few barriers from a refereeing perspective, because I suppose I'd been one of the first, other than Helen O'Reilly, to start even to be refereeing in the men's All Ireland. And the only way I can kind of really get across that is the fact that and something that I've always tried to push, whether it was as a player or as a referee, is the fact that there is no labels in the game. There shouldn't be any labels in the game. There shouldn't be about the gender, the sexuality, the size, the culture. It's about a person in the middle, either refereeing to a standard necessary, or playing the game to the level necessary at whatever level they're playing at. And I think it's a game for all sorts. I think that's why we all love the game so much. And that's why you see people, when they stop playing, they stay on in different capacities, whether it's refereeing, coaching, or in voluntary roles.
Yeah. And Ruth, what do you think could be done to encourage more women and LGBTQ plus members to take up the sport?
Gosh, that's a tough question. It's hard to know. Like, I think for women, there may be a perception that the physicality, that that element of the game is not for everyone, and I think you have to be realistic that it isn't. But it's because there are so many different facets of the game, like touch and tag, that can sort of slowly introduce you to that, and maybe build up your skills, so you can avoid maybe some of the other elements of the game that you don't enjoy. Let's be clear, touch and tag were not my forte. That's not what I was interested in. I was all about the taking the ball in and crashing it up. That's what I loved. And I think there is something about rugby, and there is a position within rugby or a role within a team that will suit pretty much anybody, you know. And I think it's so key for us to keep talking about that and speaking about that, and showcasing different types of players within the sport as well, you know, not just focusing on the hat trick try scorers, but also showcasing the front rowers that have won that scrum, that have set up that go forward ball, that have allowed that to happen.
They didn't do too much work.
Joy, did you not start as a prop?
No, Nora, I didn't actually. I'm obviously joking, Ruth. Obviously joking.
Just getting up and wondering what's going on. But look, I think that's key. I think what is challenging is as women get older, and I think this is a participation challenge across sports, is as people are juggling family and careers and all of that, is trying to make sport part of that picture. And I think that's vitally important for women, because the social structures and the support networks that come with that are invaluable. And I think trying to make sure that we can maintain that beyond the playing years of a participant is really important as well.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that, if that's okay, Anna? Just also like the life experiences, the ups, the downs, the blood, the sweat, the tears, the resilience you learn. For me, and I'm sure you agree, lads, that it's so transferable into your own personal life experiences, in growth and learning, in accepting your mistakes, in understanding the whys, so that you can minimize the same mistakes happening again. And you can transfer that completely into your professional environments, or your personal environments. And that's why, like, I would be a complete advocate to encourage people to take up the game of rugby, the wonderful game of rugby. I'm probably biased, obviously, but any sport, team sport, you just learn so much, regardless of any labels, because it shouldn't be about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always think I was way more proactive or productive when I was playing rugby, because I was so used to getting up at 5 o'clock, going to the gym, going to work, having all my meals prepared, going back to training, coming home, squeezing something else in, and then going to bed. And now I'm like, all I do is get up and drop Noah to crash and sit down in the same room every day and work and get up and collect him and make dinner. I'm like, how did I ever fit in all that?
It's a bloody miracle
stuff?
if you get a 20 minute walk in. Like, how did that happen? Yeah.
Do you miss it, or do you miss playing it?
It's funny, I just did an interview earlier and I saw it came out today as well, where I was talking about retirement. I don't necessarily miss playing it. I think when you hang up your boots, you're suddenly not the player you used to be. And if I could go back and maybe throw around a ball at a very low level and just enjoy it for what it is, I would do it. But I wasn't allowed to do that. So that's just due to the structures. So that's something, as Ruth kind of has outlined, but that probably needs to be looked at. But I guess I was ready to retire, but I wasn't ready to not be physically fit, and I wasn't ready for the weight to go on when you stop doing the training that you're doing, and I wasn't ready, like, to feel just not the athlete I was. So that's tough to kind of figure out where you're gonna have that same feeling from again.
But there's a whole portion of your personality or your identity that's wrapped up in being an athlete and being an international athlete, particularly. And I think there is a come down from that I would imagine all of us have experienced in different shapes or form. And I think once you get over that, then you can have maybe a little bit more acceptance, or you kind of settle into it a bit more. But there definitely is that transition period where you do struggle with it, because it's such a huge part of your day-to-day life that when that suddenly stops, there is an adjustment that's needed.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's really important for the organizations, Rugby Players Ireland and different organizations that are in place that support players, because in a way, when you commit your life to the game and to your team and to your country, that's what your life is, and that's what it's about. And Like, it's funny, Anna, my first referee trip was to Russia. And I'm not exaggerating, girls, when I say I was completely lost in Dublin Airport, because, and we've been to Dublin Airport, like,
You're such a sheep.
Exactly, Ruth, but we always knew that. So when you arrive in that team environment, you arrive to the airport, you hand over your passport, you're told what time to arrive, what to wear, where to be, where you're going to eat your lunch, and it's like, the best way to describe it is you're the co-pilot. When you're not driving the car and you just take no heed of what way we're going. Yeah. So when you do come out of that in high performance environment or that bubble, it's a bit of a shock to the system, and there's a sense of a loss or a bereavement, because if you singly leave and you leave your pals and they're still in that environment, they're still continuing on that journey, and in a way you're out of that bubble, and it's quite difficult to digest. It's something that you kind of have to kind of get over, I think.
Yeah. And I suppose you also need to be wise in knowing when to stop. I'm sure there's this tug that part of you still wants to continue on, but then part of you doesn't want to either get injured or be that person that maybe isn't appearing on the within the game. I'd say it's a really tough decision. Or maybe for some people, they just don't know, or they know immediately is what I was trying to say. Yeah. But I'd say it's
your back generally starts telling you.
Really? Okay. Just to everybody who's listening in, there's some questions that have come in already. What I'm going to do is address those questions at the end of the conversation, actually. So, but just keep popping them up if you have any questions for Joy or Ruth or Nora, and then I'll get to them at the end of the chat. I want to move on to another subject, which is the challenges. What challenges do you face around being a female player playing at international level? And we've kind of looked at them slightly, but maybe there's more to say. Do you think these challenges remain the same? This is at international level, and what still needs to change? Has anyone got any further thoughts on that?
Well, I think we've spoken, how much the landscape has changed in that regard, in terms of the supports and the structures that are in place, particularly for that international squad. But there's always room for improvement. And I think definitely what is most challenging for players, and what I would have found most challenging, is trying to balance it all and trying to keep everything at the level that you need it to be. And generally, if you're a high performance athlete and you strive to be a high performing athlete, you generally have those aspirations for all elements of your life. So that's really hard to manage in terms of your own expectations, and if you're trying to juggle training, job, family life, just the physical, trying to fit all that into your day, into your week, and be the best you can be is challenging, and I think having the time to recover optimally, all of those things. And I think until you can in some way take away the need to possibly work as much, or to work entirely, that's going to remain a challenge for people. But then again, that's going to maybe exclude a certain type of person from the elite athlete phase if they're not willing or able, for whatever reason, to put pause on their career. But I think, that for me was always the biggest challenge, and I think it remains the same.
Yeah, I would.
Sorry.
I was just going to agree with Ruth. It's kind of that feeling of you don't want to let anybody down. So you're a high achiever in your job, and you want to do a really good job. You don't want to let your family down, so you're trying to give as much time to them as well. And then you don't want to let your teammates down. And then you don't want to let yourself down and not kind of hit the standard that you want to hit within the sport. Like, I can remember for me, I just felt I could never do enough training. I couldn't squeeze in the extra skills sessions that I wanted to do to make me a better kicker or anything like that. And I remember it once, very early days, when I was asked to join the Sevens program, and I kind of weighed it up, and I was like, okay, I don't feel I'm young enough to just jump straight into this and give up my job. I think I have to think of my career here. So my focus was, no, I'm going to stay focused on the 15s as much as possible, and I'm going to keep working, because I need to have something at the end of it. I can't just give it all up But yeah.
Yeah. So Joy, what do you think the perfect setup is? What is it full professionalism? How do you get that balance right?
Oh, that's a very difficult question, and it's very difficult for me to comment on. If we want to go full professional within Ireland, I think that the top league, the IL Women's League, needs to be more competitive, more teams involved, more interest from nationally, more bums and seats. And like, if you look at, I suppose, the Premiership in England, I would like to comment on the challenges. I suppose we did touch on from playing, the barriers, the challenges that we had throughout the last couple of decades. But from a refereeing perspective, I think that the main challenges within the game that I came across was more gender-based labelled rather than sexuality-based, which I obviously wasn't delighted to have these barriers, but I was delighted to see that it was never held against me for my sexuality. Like, it never really came up. I remember walking into Donnybrook. I was reffing in under 20s interpros, and I walked into the changing room, and they never, like, back 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of the guys that I refereed never had been refereed by women, and a couple of the lads started giggling, and I did nothing about it, and I was livid, and I went out and I warmed up, and I was so angry at myself for not respecting myself more, for reacting, but also reacting in the right way. And if I did do something, I probably would have reacted in the wrong way. And sometimes being confrontational, you lose the message. But what I did do was I was reflective, and I thought, okay, this has happened. If this happens again, what are you going to do about it? And when I went to start that game, I could tell I had no respect from that team. So a couple of months later, I was reffing in the British and Irish Cup, one level below Pro 14. And it was on International Women's Day, and I was reffing Ospreys and grown men, and the exact same thing happened. And I said, I have you, you little shit. So I was doing my front row talk, and he kept laughing and sniggering. And the more he sniggered, the more the lads that are around him sniggered. And you know, when you're in school and you see your teacher giving you the silent treatment, I said, right, I'm going to try this. So in mid-sentence, I stopped and I just stared at him. And I just didn't move my eyes from his eyes. And the silence became more silence, and it became more uncomfortable. And his face went from a smile to serious. His face went from pale to red to strawberry. And I just smiled, and I said, right, we good to continue. And all the lads burst out laughing. And I went on and I reffed that game, and I had no bothers. But I suppose we are always going to come across challenges and barriers. And it's about, I suppose, understanding if you don't understand what best way to deal with immediately, certainly if something happens, go away, be reflective, and be prepared for the next time that it may happen. But yeah. I am very happy to say that my sexuality has never come into it, no matter what games I've refereed. And the biggest barrier still is the gender, is proving that it's not about a label, it's not about the gender in the middle, it's about a match being refereed at the standard necessary or being played.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point about, at least you thought about it, how you would deal with it the next time. It just reminded me of that female referee in a big soccer match a few months ago. Do you remember that? There was discussion. I think a player put his hand on her shoulder, and I don't know if words were exchanged, and she just, she said she was happy with how she reacted. Other refs said she was happy, but I could see her just going a little bit rigid, and her just... Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe just her considering, what do I need? What do I do? I'm just going to not do anything, So I think it's kind of similar to what you're saying there. You certainly went back and approached it brilliantly. I want to move on. It's funny because I want to let everyone know us four had a conversation yesterday, just going through things, and the idea. The theme of parenting came up, and I said to Nora and Joy and Ruth, I don't know if anybody's got anything to say about this. And then we have plenty to say about this, because there's a baby on the way and 2 babies. So Nora and Ruth have children, yeah? And Joy, you have one arriving
bone in the oven.
Bone in the oven. time.
Baking away, browning up another couple of months, and we're ready to go.
Yeah, and what did you say earlier on, Joy? I'm only joking.
No, I'll say it. Whoever says pregnancy is a wonderful thing can rise out of me. Glowing. I've not heard of glowing.
And you're getting work done and everything prepared. You're getting bathrooms finished and everything.
Step ahead, Anna.
So the question is, what kind of unique implications does a female athlete or woman working in sport face when deciding to become a parent? And what impact do you think it might have on your participation in sports and physical activities? Nora, I'll come to you first.
Oh, great. So I suppose I have a couple of views on this. I think it's been the traditional case has been that a female will go through her sporting career and then will decide to hang up her boots in order to have babies. And I think it's really important that we start to change, and we have started, but that mentality changes, and that women know that it's okay to decide in their early 20s, you know what, I'm actually going to have a child now, or late 20s, or whenever it might be, and that they can have a child and take a break and go back to sport. And there are so many fantastic athletes that have done that and have shown that they come back even stronger. So I think it's just a really important message to get across. In Sport Ireland, we actually came out with a maternity policy for our carded athletes, and it was to do exactly that. It was to ensure that if they did become pregnant, that they didn't have any fear that their funding would be cut, or they'd be kicked off a training program or something like that. Or if they wanted to plan a family, that they could be comfortable in knowing that they can go to their director of sport and say to him and her, this is what I want to plan, and that they'll still be funded and they don't have to fear losing that kind of financial security. From my own perspective, I'm the other mum, I guess. I didn't carry Noah, but we have a little 16-month-old baby boy, and he's great fun. But if I even think back to when I was playing and everything that comes with having a baby, fair play. I don't know how people do it and keep trying to play. And I guess it comes back to the whole, you might be elite, but you're not professional. So you still have to do the early morning shifts, and you still have to go to work, and you still have to figure out how you're going to train as well. So I do think it's difficult for female athletes, for me as a supporting partner or a supporting wife. If I was still training and going through this, I don't know either how good a mum I would have been or how good an athlete I would have been.
Yeah. Ruth, do you feel there needs to be much more of a conversation about this? Because and I mentioned this yesterday when I played basketball years ago, and if a woman on the team became pregnant and had a baby, it just wasn't really spoken about. It's like they went off and then they came back, or they didn't come back. But there wasn't really much of a conversation about it.
But I think there tends to be quite a compartmentalization of the different facets of women's lives across the board, not just in terms of sport. I think, you tend to try not to have your family interfere with your work life too much, and the same applies for sporting life. I think you tend to try and keep that separate, and a lot of that is for mental health reasons as much as anything that you would choose to do that. But I think the pandemic has certainly shown us that there are times when all will collide, and I think that has made and I would hope it has made society more accepting of the fact that people have families, children exist, and they are going to interfere and clash and not be put where you want them to be at every point in the day. And I think it's important that is seen in sport as well. And I have very few examples of seeing throughout my career women actively parenting while participating in sport. There's Tanya Rosser managed it fantastically well, and similar to what Nora is saying, now that I have become a parent, that is even more amazing to me now, knowing what that took to do. And I've seen players. There's a player in Clontarf, Cliona Hughes, who I recall breastfeeding at half time, you know, when throwing the child to someone to mind on the sidelines. And that is amazing to me. And I think it would be fantastic if we saw that more, if that was totally normalized, and that everything can coexist, you know, quite well together. And look at it, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge of how we keep women participating in sport in general when they have all of these other obligations and you know, things that they're trying to juggle. And the more we can normalize them becoming part of it and their families becoming part of the sport, I think the better for everybody.
Yeah. And Joy, with you about to become a parent, what were the challenges for you in relation to that journey and your sporting career?
Well, just to add to Ruth's point, like, it is about normalizing it. The more people that do it, the more that we see it, the more it's a cultural change. It's you know, it becomes the norm, and people can accept it more. The challenges, I suppose, to add to that as well, with same-sex couples, particularly female couples, it's the challenges of getting pregnant, the time that's consumed, the barriers, and it can be a very long process. So for women, whether it's playing or people who are refereeing or with whatever environment it is, it's about managing the emotions, if not successful in the first couple of attempts, whilst trying to manage the cycles, the complications of the cycles, but still having the stressors of having to perform. So there's an awful lot more in it than just becoming pregnant and dealing with coming out, getting fit to go back into that environment again. Now, thankfully, I'm very lucky because I've always been quite open and transparent with my boss within the RFU, and I've openly told him my plans, family plans, and now I'm sat here as a TMO match television official after TMOing in the Men's Six Nations. So they're very much supporting me and staying involved in the game while I can't be running around in the middle or on the sideline. But certainly there is a lot to it, but it does help when you have the support structures around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose as LGBTQ plus community members, do you feel you have equal rights to others when it comes to parenting? You know, do you feel it's something, I suppose, like what you're talking about, Joy, it's very private in a way, but yet it's something that you have to discuss with colleagues to let them know that you're doing this, you know.
Well, what it really doesn't sit well with me, Anna, is you don't see heterosexual couples going up to their boss and telling them their intentions.
Yeah.
So why should a same-sex couple or a person or an individual who's trying to become pregnant, who has to go through those extra steps, have to do so? I'm not saying I had to. I chose to, because I suppose I have that relationship with my boss, and I knew I'd have that support. But it's a question. It's a question. Maybe as women, do we put that extra pressure on ourselves as well?
Yeah.
I think it'll also be like when we were growing up, I suppose, how many times do you have seen a same-sex couple on the sideline watching their kids play? And so that's kind of the next phase where I'm kind of intrigued about now. What will the attitudes be like in whatever team or whatever sport that Noah plays? What will be like? Will it be pointed out, oh look, there's Noah's two moms, or will they not even bat an eye? And I don't know that until it all happens, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I think, you know, it's incumbent on us to mention the legal side of it. You know, there's a huge amount of preparation, of deep thinking and planning and premeditation that goes into a same-sex couple having a child, and then to have the additional hoops to jump through thereafter legally that you may not even be able to jump through, depending on what way you've gone about doing what you've just done. And I think that's a huge challenge, because until we're all equal, none of us are equal. You know, it's a massive barrier, I think, for all of us. And it's something that has to be addressed and has to be kept in the forefront of public of people's minds, because it's a huge issue. And I think if we have to plan to the level that we do, then surely the legal side of it should follow us through with it as well.
I'll tell you a very funny story in relation to that, and Claire might be listening, my wife, and she'll kill me, but it is like that. And there's the whole story that, you know, if something happened to Claire and she was in hospital, or if something happened, what would happen to Noah? So she turned around to her mum and was like, you know, Mum, like, if anything ever happened to me in relation to Noah, and before she could finish her sentence, her mum goes, no, Claire, I'm too old to raise another child. That's like, of course,
I love it.
of course, Nora. Well, yeah, of course, I'll look after it. Don't worry.
Oh, I love it, Nora.
But thankfully, the whole like that. Yeah, you have to go in front of a judge and sort out the birth certificate and everything. And I guess in a way, like, I didn't think too much of it as much as maybe Claire did. She was really adamant that we would sort out all of that, and made some really good friends who had legal backgrounds who helped us. Like, I don't know how you would do it if you didn't, and the terminology you have to use and everything, and the cost as well. But yeah, like, it's obviously, there's a lot of couples out there who aren't as lucky as me, maybe, who has been able to go on the birth certificate and be labelled as another mum or a parent. So.
Yeah, that's all really interesting and great to hear your three stories. I think, you know, people will be really delighted to hear those. I want to ask just one more question to each, and then just to everybody who's listening, I'll take questions then, or I'll read out questions that you put on the comments for our three panelists. I know there's a couple in at the moment. I suppose it's going back to visibility and coming out, and for young athletes who are listening to this, young LGBTQ athletes, I think it is just, I suppose, invaluable hearing your stories. And I wanted to ask the three of you, when eventually you did come out, you know, was it a weight off your shoulders? Did it improve your mental health? Was it, you know, how I suppose happy were you that you made that decision to come out? If any of you have any thoughts on that and why it's worth it.
I might start, because I think in some aspect, or in some sense, I probably never did come out, you know, and obviously that the horse is well bolted at this point. You know, I'm married to Lisa. We have a child together. So, but for me, I suppose it was quite late on. I was 30 before I met my wife. And for me, I definitely struggled with it. I think because I wasn't sure what this was, you know, I in the sense that it was very personal, and very much related to that one person rather than to a broader gender. And so that for me, I think, has made my experience with that quite different, maybe to others. But absolutely, it's obviously it's changed the course of my life, you know, unimaginably, and I'm hugely happy and contented in the life that we have built for ourselves and for what's to come. And I think you've just got to listen to yourself and to really understand, or try to understand, and just go with the flow as much as you can. You know, the rest will sort itself out. At the end of the day, the only person that matters is you and how you feel about yourself. Other people's opinions will fade away and will melt away with time, regardless of what way they react. That would be my only advice.
Yeah, Nora.
Very similar to Ruth. But I guess, like, for me, whenever I did come out, I didn't kind of time it properly. Mine was actually, I signed a petition at Electric Picnic for probably gay marriage or something like that, when it was just very early days. And it appeared in the Irish Times, and my mum always kind of saw the heading and was like, Electric Picnic, petition for gay marriage. Nora was there. I wonder. And so she went down the couple of thousand names and found me. So
Wow.
So I think it's fair to say she was suspicious.
I can imagine your mother doing this. It is.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, that's
And
quality.
so then it was I came home from Dublin one weekend. She's like, I saw this, and so I was like, all right, yeah. So, but that's what that happened. But I guess when that all came out, it was just such a relief not to have to lie anymore and not have to pretend to have boyfriends if you were seeing somebody, or why were you disappearing off to wherever. So that was really nice. I think now when I look at younger kids, young teenagers who come out, I'm so proud of them. I'm so happy for them. And in a way, I'm kind of jealous of them. Like, God, they've got their whole teenage years to just have so much fun and like just enjoy themselves and feel free. Like, it's, you just feel like, good for you, go and enjoy it and meet like loads of friends and have great fun. That's what, and why I'm kind of saying that is I'm working with a guy, and he was telling me his 12-year-old niece came out to him, and I was just like, that is amazing.
Wow.
And he's like, she's the brightest kid in Ireland, I think, at the minute. But the fact that she feels that she can, and it feels safe for her. Like it wasn't that I didn't feel safe. It was just always people's views, and that they would not like me or not talk to me anymore.
Yeah. Enjoy.
It's funny because I remember having a conversation with my mum when I was 10 or 11, and I was at my cousin's house, and a friend of hers was playing the piano, and I just couldn't stop looking at her legs. And I came home and I cried as I was in front of the TV, and I was like, Mum, it can't be normal, and she was like, oh, it's natural, you're just exploring, and that was fine. Like, geez, I was 24 until I had the actual conversation with her. She could have helped me and saved me 10 years of my life, and I would have had that fun for that 10 years. But I just found it so draining, like just lying and telling people I'm in one place when I'm in another place, just so I could cover the story that I wasn't with my girlfriend at the time. And eventually, when I did come out to my mum, she was brilliant. And she said, don't you cry another tear. But her heart, she's such a big heart, but her actions didn't come there after her words. And I could see that she struggled, and our relationship deteriorated immensely after those conversations for a year or two. And I'll never forget, I was sat down in front of the TV, and a sex scene comes up, and you're with your parents. Well, a lesbian sex scene came up in front of and it was just mortifying, and it opened up a conversation. And basically, my mum asked me something, and I said, and I answered, and she goes, but Jodie, you, and in relation to rugby and playing rugby and being around women, she goes, but you choose to be with women, you choose to be around women, so you probably want to be with a woman. And I remember getting up and going upstairs, and I was upset, and I came back down, and I knew I had to be calm, and I said, Mum, I need to talk to you. She said, I've upset you, haven't I? I said, no, Mum, but I need you to understand that I don't choose to be with women. I don't choose to want to be with women. If I had a choice, I'd choose to be with a man for an easier life. I choose to have a family and not be stigmatized, or to have this more difficult life as I saw it at the time. And from that moment on, our relationship increased significantly for the better. And I think from that moment, and I think the most important part is, and my main fear, like you, Nora, was, will people see me differently? Will I not be loved the same? Especially those who you love and you care about. But it was about the moment you can accept yourself for who you are, is the moment that you don't really care about what others feel about you, because though if they have a problem, well, they're not really your true friends. Those who love you will love you for no matter what sexuality you are. They love you for the person. It makes no difference if you're with a man or a woman. And I think that's a process you have to go through.
Yeah. That's incredible hearing those stories. And I remember it myself. It's very difficult when you're trying to come to terms with it yourself, because you don't have the answers immediately, and therefore you don't have the confidence to be kind of, I suppose, truly in the know of what you are or who you are. And that's always a really, like Joy, what you're saying with your mother, there might have been a bit of that with myself and my mother too, because we're all finding out what is going on, but that's brilliant hearing those stories. And what I'm going to do now is just go through a couple of questions, and if any of you have any thoughts, do do say them. Alva Nolan said, in terms of LGBTQ sports participation at an elite level, do you think there's pressure or an inclination for players to hide their relationships?
From speaking from my own experience and certainly within the Irish women's setup when I was involved, and I think I would imagine it continues at the moment, there are no issues regarding that. And I think for female athletes particularly, I would imagine it's less of an issue. I think we have seen and we have certainly heard that for male athletes find it a lot harder to be open and transparent regarding their sexuality. But certainly from my experience, there was no need to hide it. It didn't come into play, to be honest. You were too busy and too focused on the matters at hand in terms of training and performance that, personal lives didn't come into it unless for some reason they were impacting those, and that wasn't anything to do with your sexuality,
Yeah. I do think, though, at grassroots level, though, there is a heteronormative world out there. And I think, for coaches and people who are involved at an organizational level, there does need to be a sensitivity and an awareness that there are going to be kids and teenagers who are going to be different on lots of different levels. And someone has just sent a message here saying, this is a great insight as a coach, parent, and heterosexual person not exposed to the experiences that you four ladies have. Thank you so much. I will not experience your path, but insights such as this help make me a better coach to younger people. It's been invaluable, and more heterosexual people need to be listening. That's a nice comment. Claire Brogan is saying, really well done, ladies. Loved listening. Now, Julia Valentino emailed us beforehand. We really appreciate that, Julia, and has also messaged here. What do you think about trans athletes' inclusion? All the opposition we are facing, especially trans women, and what you think should be done to push back this transphobic wave. I know in some of the webinars that I have had, the feeling is very much that the sporting organizations and the sporting bodies really need to do more, really need to have more conversations about this. It's something that needs to be addressed. I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts on this as rugby players.
I think we've spoken about it a lot in the last hour about the inclusive nature of rugby particularly, and how that is very much at the core. And I feel that certainly extends to the issue that trans athletes are having. I think personally, I genuinely don't know enough about the issues that they're facing and the challenges that surround it. But I think it is incumbent on sporting bodies to really look into it, to understand the challenges that it may present. At a personal level, I think grassroots participation rugby, I feel should be and can be open to everybody, and I think anything that can be done to do that is only in the interests of the game. There can only be positives that come from that. But I think as you maybe go up the levels in terms of performance and elite athletes, you come up against more challenges, and so that's where I think maybe more research and is needed. But yeah, I think there is more work that needs to be done in that area. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I probably would agree with that, and echo what Ruth said there as well about the research. And without knowing enough about it, I'm aware that there is a lack of research on the topic, which doesn't help either. But at the same time, you don't want that to be the reason why nothing's done. I mean, from a Sport Ireland perspective, our point of view, it is definitely important for us that we're doing what we can to ensure sport is inclusive as possible. For example, at the minute, one of my colleagues is working on a diversity and inclusion policy. And that's, I guess, why we're doing that is to kind of broaden our scope of diversity and inclusion and the remit that we have in order for us to be able to support sports and to advise sports as well on our own policies, and that includes absolutely everything. And there is a consultation process happening at the minute. So I think it's key that these conversations come up or come to the fore in that consultation process, so that these points can be included in the research that we're doing on it, and can be included in the development of the policy. And so therefore we'll have targets and actions then that we can I guess look at, and that we can use, and that we can promote to the sports as well. And that would probably be a key thing for me, and certainly that consultation I mentioned, I think it's open until the end of April, and it's all about calling on the general public to submit their views to that, and they can find any of that information on the Sport Ireland websites or social media channels or anything like that, because it's fairly live.
Is that sportireland.ie?
Yeah, sportireland.ie, or just at Sport Ireland on Twitter or something. There's quite a lot of tweets going up about encouraging people to. It's only a short survey as well. I've done it myself, but I think it's really important that the messaging around, whether it's transgender participants in sport or anything like any other forms of, whether it's disability or gender, whatever it might be, that it's all included.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that, and thanks, Julie, for the question. Final question here. Curious to know. Oh, it's from Elaine Buckley. Hi, Elaine. Great discussion. Curious to know who would have been the first publicly out high-profile sporting figure ye would have been aware of, if any.
Elaine Buckley. The best quizzer around. I suppose for me it would be Martina Navratilova. Help me with that one. I always struggle with her second name, but yeah, probably Martina.
Yeah, Martina for me too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have been the same. And then I was trying to think like more familiar, like closer to home, and I can't really think of any. There were probably athletes who you maybe thought were gay, but you wouldn't have known. So yeah, but no, there was no one there who you would have seen and who you would have said, oh, it's okay to be gay. And so I think that's why it's really important that we are open and honest, and when we're kind of going like these discussions, but particularly when you still are an athlete as well, and that you can lead by example. I think that's important.
Yeah,
she was ahead of. I think she was ahead of her time, really, wasn't she?
Yeah,
considering all things,
totally.
you know. Big respect there.
Yeah, and that's why this conversation is so important, and we really, really appreciate it. So thank you to Nora Stapleton, to Joy Neville, and to Ruth O'Reilly for taking part in this conversation. And thank you to everybody listening. And hopefully, yeah, we'll do more of these again soon. So thanks a million, girls. Bye.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.